Every thought you think sends a signal. It builds a pathway in your brain, strengthening or weakening the system that determines how you perceive life, how you react, and what kind of future you build. If you've been waking up anxious, overthinking past mistakes, assuming the worst, or battling constant mental fatigue, then what you're facing is not just emotional, it's neural. This speech isn't about empty motivation. It's about flipping a switch inside your brain using tools grounded in neuroscience to interrupt and kill negative thinking patterns at their source. If you stay with me through the next few minutes, you'll learn how to deactivate the circuits that fuel doubt, shame, and fear, and replace them with clarity, calm, and confidence. This is brain control, not wishful thinking. And once you understand it, you'll never be helpless in the face of negativity again. Negative thoughts hijack your brain's operating system because they're deeply wired into your survival instincts. The brain is not wired for happiness, it's wired for survival. Thousands of years ago, anticipating danger kept you alive. Today, that same mechanism is triggered by arguments, deadlines, social media, and self-judgment. When you entertain negative thoughts, your brain doesn't distinguish between imagined threat and real threat. It begins pumping cortisol, narrowing your focus, shutting down long-term planning, and looping back into more fearful thinking. You begin to believe that this anxious, panicked, pessimistic version of yourself is who you really are. But this isn't your identity. It's your neurochemistry in survival mode. And the longer you stay there, the more your neural pathways become biased toward negativity. But the brain is plastic. It changes based on what you do repeatedly. And if negative thinking is learned, it can be unlearned and replaced. Let's break the illusion of being stuck. When people say, "I just can't stop thinking this way," they're actually describing a loop in the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that becomes active when you're not focused on a task. It's the daydreaming network, the self-talk network, the internal critic network. And when it goes unchecked, it turns you into your worst enemy. The key to breaking this loop is awareness plus action. First, recognize the moment you're spiraling. Don't try to silence it. Label the thought. This is a fear-based loop. That simple act of labeling activates the prefrontal cortex and brings logic back online. Then, intervene immediately with physical action. Whether that's a visual reset, like looking at the horizon, or a physiological sigh, 2 short inhales followed by a long exhale, you can shut down the emotional storm and regain control in seconds. Now, the root of negative thinking lies in specific circuits, mainly the amygdala, the insular cortex, and the subgenual anterior cingulate. These regions light up in scans when people recall painful memories or imagine rejection and failure. But you also have systems like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that can regulate and override these emotional triggers. The problem? Most people never train these regulatory circuits. You train your muscles in the gym, but you expect your mind to handle life without ever strengthening the very regions responsible for emotional control. When you engage in directed thought, like journaling, reflection with intention, or meditation focused on breath, you are exercising these circuits. And over time, they grow stronger. Emotional pain doesn't vanish, but it loses its grip over you. You stop reacting. You start observing. And observation is the first step toward transformation. One of the most powerful tools to kill negative thoughts is something called physiological state control. And the fastest way to do it is through breath and visual focus. When you're overwhelmed, shift your eyes to a panoramic view. Go outside. Look at the horizon. That single act reduces the activity in your amygdala. Next, breathe in through the nose twice quickly, then exhale slowly through the mouth. This physiological sigh is the body's built-in reset mechanism. It lowers carbon dioxide levels, signals calm to the brainstem, and immediately reduces anxiety. These are not hacks. These are ancient biological levers waiting to be pulled. When you control your breath and your gaze, you send a message to the brain, "I am not in danger." That message cuts the loop of negative thought and opens space for new, empowering thoughts to enter. But to go further, we need to rewire motivation itself. The problem with most people stuck in negative thinking is that they're addicted to certainty, not growth. They wait for the world to change their thoughts instead of realizing that positive thinking isn't just a mood. It's a skill trained by dopamine. Every time you take a small, courageous action, even if it's just writing one sentence, walking 5 minutes, or making one call, you activate dopamine. And dopamine isn't just a reward chemical. It's a movement chemical. It motivates action. The more you reward small steps, the more your brain learns to seek progress instead of protection. That's the secret to replacing negative thoughts, not with fake positivity, but with evidence that you are building something real, one action at a time. Finally, we need to understand how sleep, movement, and rhythm control your mind. If you don't sleep 7-9 hours consistently, your amygdala becomes overactive and your frontal cortex weakens, literally reversing your brain's ability to think clearly. If you don't move your body daily, stress chemicals accumulate and distort your perspective. And if you don't create rhythmic routines, such as morning light exposure, consistent meals, social engagement, and evening wind-down rituals, your circadian system becomes chaotic, making anxiety your default. Killing negative thoughts isn't just about thinking better, it's about living better on a biological level. Build your day around your brain's rhythms, and your thoughts will follow. Negative thinking is not your identity. It's a temporary state created by specific circuits in your brain that are firing because of how you've lived, breathed, and focused. But you can change it. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are adaptable. You are plastic. The same brain that once believed lies can learn truth. The same circuits that once fired fear can fire hope. The tools are in your hands: awareness, breath, vision, motion, sleep, and focused thought. Use them daily. Practice them like your life depends on it, because it does. Kill your negative thinking before it kills your potential. And remember, you don't have to become a new person. You just have to become the version of you that your brain has always been capable of creating. Let your biology serve your destiny. Let's break the illusion of being stuck. When you find yourself trapped in a pattern of negative thinking, overanalyzing conversations, predicting worst-case scenarios, or spiraling into self-doubt, it often feels like a character flaw. But neuroscience shows it's not a personality defect. It's a feedback loop in your brain known as the default mode network, or DMN. This network becomes active during periods of rest and self-referential thought. It's where you ruminate, replay the past, and imagine the future. In a healthy brain, the DMN quiets down when you're engaged in a task or focused on the external world. But when it's overactive or unregulated, it creates a mental echo chamber that amplifies fear, regret, and anxiety. What makes this so destructive is how quickly it hijacks your attention without you noticing. You start the day fine, then suddenly you're stuck inside a thought like, what if I fail? Or why am I not further ahead? That thought feels real and urgent because it's triggering stress responses that tighten your muscles, speed your heart rate, and narrow your focus. The brain treats imagined threats the same way it treats physical danger. So, the longer you stay in that thought, the more your body and mind believe it's true. This is how negativity becomes a habit. And like all habits, it can be broken, but not by resisting the thought. Resistance only strengthens it. What you need is interruption. The moment you feel yourself spiraling, you must name it. This activates your prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for rational thinking and control. Simply saying, this is a fear loop, or this is not a fact, disrupts the automatic flow and pulls your awareness into the present. That awareness gives you the power to choose a different action. Physical movement, even something as small as standing up or walking across the room, sends signals to the brain that the environment has changed. That breaks the static loop. The key here is immediacy. The faster you act, the easier it is to interrupt the DMN before it builds momentum. You can also engage the senses, feel a textured object, splash cold water on your face, or change your visual field by looking outside. These aren't gimmicks. They work because your brain cannot stay stuck in rumination and be fully present in the physical world at the same time. You're using the body as a lever to bring the mind back to now. Over time, this becomes a skill. You train your brain to associate mental chaos with physical redirection. You don't need to silence your thoughts, you just need to stop obeying them. Every time you do this, you weaken the negative loop and strengthen your capacity for self-command. The result isn't instant peace, but a quiet power, the awareness that you are no longer a passenger in your mind, but a participant. That shift, repeated daily, is how you dismantle the illusion of being stuck and take control of the very circuits that once controlled you. The root of negative thinking lies within specific, mapped neural circuits in the brain, and understanding these circuits is essential to breaking free from their influence. At the center of this pattern is the amygdala, a small almond-shaped region in the brain responsible for detecting threat and initiating fear responses. When you think negatively, especially thoughts rooted in fear, shame, or hopelessness, the amygdala becomes hyperactive. This activation triggers a cascade of biological changes. Cortisol is released, your heart rate increases, and your brain prepares to respond to danger, even when there is none. Alongside the amygdala, the insular cortex lights up, processing emotional pain and internal discomfort. This region helps you feel sensations like dread in your chest or anxiety in your gut, further anchoring your body to the belief that something is wrong. Another major player in this circuitry is the subgenual anterior cingulate cortex, a region tied to sadness and overthinking. When this area is overused, it contributes to a constant state of internal dialogue focused on what's missing, what's wrong, or what could go wrong. But here's the game. Changing insight, the brain is equipped with another set of regions designed to override these survival circuits. One of them is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It helps with executive function, making decisions, regulating emotions, and creating new thought patterns. Unfortunately, this region gets shut down when the fear circuits dominate. This means that even when you want to think clearly, your brain may not allow it unless you actively engage in behaviors that reawaken those control regions. This is why many people say, "I know I shouldn't think this way, but I can't stop." The biology confirms this experience. The emotional brain floods the system before the rational brain gets a chance to speak. So how do you reverse that? You begin training the regulatory circuits the same way you'd train a weak muscle. Meditation is one method, not because it clears the mind, but because it strengthens the prefrontal cortex's ability to observe thoughts without reacting. Journaling with intention does the same, turning abstract emotion into concrete, manageable data. Even tasks like learning a new language or solving puzzles activate executive function, shifting blood flow away from the fear centers and toward the regions that create logic and stability. What's most powerful is that these circuits are trainable at any age. The more you use them, the more neurons fire together, wire together, and build new default pathways. So the next time a negative thought arises, it doesn't grab hold of your identity. It floats in your mind like a cloud, seen but not absorbed. And this isn't just about feeling better. It's about building a brain that resists chaos and defaults to clarity, not because of affirmations or optimism, but because the underlying architecture has been reshaped by your decisions, day after day. One of the fastest and most reliable ways to disrupt negative thought patterns is by taking control of your body's built-in regulatory systems, specifically your breath and visual focus. These two levers are not psychological tricks. They are deeply embedded biological systems that evolved to regulate your internal state and bring your brain back into balance when it veers off course. When you are overwhelmed by stress, fear, or intrusive thoughts, the amygdala goes into overdrive, sending panic signals throughout the body. But you can override those signals by engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's natural calming response. And the quickest entry point is through the breath. One method, backed by neurophysiological research, is called the physiological sigh. It involves 2 quick inhales through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This pattern mimics a natural response your body uses to relieve stress and rebalance the oxygen-carbon dioxide ratio in the blood. As soon as you perform this breathing pattern, you activate neurons in the brainstem that signal calm throughout your entire nervous system. The heart rate slows, the muscles relax, and most importantly, the panic circuits in your brain begin to deactivate. But breathing isn't the only powerful reset. Visual focus is equally critical. When you're stuck in negative thinking, your visual field often becomes constricted. You narrow your gaze, stare at screens, or focus inward. This tunnel vision is another survival response designed for threat detection. But by intentionally widening your gaze, looking at a horizon line, a distant tree, or even a window view, you send a message back to the brain that the environment is safe. This panoramic vision downregulates amygdala activity and calms the stress circuits. The combination of controlled breath and broad vision creates a shift in your internal state that allows you to regain cognitive clarity. You're no longer at the mercy of the emotional storm. You're stepping into a role of regulation and leadership over your own biology. And the beauty of this approach is its immediacy. You don't have to wait until you get home, lie down, or meditate. You can breathe and shift your gaze anywhere, before a meeting, during an anxious moment, or even mid-conversation. Over time, using these tools builds self-trust. You learn that no matter how intense the negativity feels, you have the power to calm your system, think more clearly, and choose your next move. This isn't just emotional intelligence, it's body-brain integration. It's not about pretending bad thoughts don't exist. It's about building the capacity to meet those thoughts with tools, not panic. And once that skill is internalized, you begin to walk through life with a grounded presence that doesn't crack every time your mind drifts into chaos. The key to transforming negative thinking isn't just suppressing bad thoughts. It's retraining your brain to crave progress, growth, and optimism through the very system it already uses to seek pleasure, the dopamine system. Dopamine is not just a reward chemical, it's a neurochemical signal that drives motivation, attention, and learning. When you're caught in cycles of self-doubt, fear, and worry, it's because your brain has learned, often through repetition, that these patterns produce predictable, familiar outcomes, even if those outcomes are painful. The brain prefers predictability over uncertainty, so it keeps you looped in negative thinking because it feels safe. But what if you could shift that reward system so that your brain begins to seek and crave positive action instead of negative rumination? You can, and it starts with small, intentional behaviors that release dopamine in response to effort, not just achievement. For example, when you wake up and immediately do something beneficial, like stretching, journaling, or stepping into sunlight, you send a message to the brain. Effort equals reward. That signal releases a pulse of dopamine, and that small release is enough to reinforce the behavior, making your brain more likely to repeat it tomorrow. This is how habits form not through willpower, but through chemical reinforcement. The same principle applies throughout the day. When you break a negative loop by doing something uncomfortable but growth-oriented, like initiating a hard conversation, working on a creative project, or even exercising when you don't feel like it, you are teaching the brain to associate effort with satisfaction. Over time, your mind begins to seek these behaviors. The dopamine system reshapes your desires, making positivity a reflex rather than a chore. What's equally important is that you learn to attach dopamine to the process, not just the result. If you only reward yourself when something is finished or perfect, your brain stays locked in the binary of success and failure. But when you celebrate small wins, the 5 minutes of deep work, the one chapter read, the tiny act of courage, you wire your brain to love growth. And a brain that loves growth doesn't stay stuck in negative thinking because it sees challenge as a pathway, not a threat. You also begin to experience less resistance. What used to feel difficult now becomes familiar. You build momentum. You feel less like you're forcing change and more like you're being pulled toward it. And that's the ultimate goal, not to pretend that pain doesn't exist, but to build a brain that knows how to move forward anyway, driven by chemistry that favors life over fear. When we talk about eliminating negative thinking, we often overlook one of the most important factors, the daily rhythm of your biology. Your brain does not operate in isolation. It's directly influenced by sleep, movement, light exposure, and daily habits that either support or sabotage your mental health. One of the most powerful ways to regulate your thoughts is by aligning your lifestyle with your brain's natural operating systems, particularly the circadian rhythm. This internal clock governs your sleep, wake cycles, your mood stability, your energy levels, and even your emotional resilience. If your sleep is inconsistent, even by an hour or two each night, the brain's emotion-regulating circuits start to malfunction. The amygdala, the part of the brain that reacts to fear and stress, becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, the region that helps you think rationally and control impulses, becomes less active. The result is a brain that overacts, underthinks, and defaults to negative interpretations. That's why someone with poor sleep will feel more anxious, more reactive, and less hopeful. Even if nothing external has changed, movement also plays a vital role. Exercise is not just for physical health. It's a chemical intervention for the brain. Even moderate movement increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which acts like fertilizer for brain cells. It supports learning, memory, and cognitive flexibility. These are the very abilities needed to break free from rigid, negative thinking. Movement also increases dopamine and serotonin, which elevate mood and create a sense of forward motion. But here's where most people go wrong. They think it has to be extreme. It doesn't. A daily walk, some light strength training, or even 5 minutes of stretching in the morning can begin shifting your internal state dramatically. Another overlooked factor is light exposure. Getting direct sunlight within the first hour of waking sends a powerful signal to the brain that it's daytime, increasing alertness, setting your circadian rhythm, and regulating hormone release. Without that signal, your body drifts into biological confusion, making it harder to sleep at night and stay focused during the day, two conditions that feed anxiety and negative thought loops. The more you create a predictable rhythm, wake up at the same time, eat meals at regular intervals, limit caffeine late in the day, reduce screen time at night, the more you train your brain to expect stability. And when the body feels stable, the mind doesn't panic. It doesn't need to search for threats or catastrophes. It relaxes into presence. This rhythm builds a foundation for everything else you want to accomplish mentally, because without it, your brain is constantly playing defense. But with it, you give yourself a stable biological platform for clarity, creativity, and emotional control. And once your biology starts working for you, not against you, killing negative thinking becomes less of a battle and more of a natural byproduct of living in alignment with how your brain was always designed to function. Killing negative thinking is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice built on deliberate action, consistency, and understanding how to shape your internal environment. You don't eliminate mental habits by hoping they disappear. You replace them by installing stronger ones that serve your goals. That begins with creating a system, a repeatable routine that trains your brain every day to expect clarity instead of chaos. The foundation of this system is self-regulation, and the tools are simple but powerful: morning exposure to natural light, structured movement, strategic breathing, focused work sessions, and intentional wind-down rituals at night. The morning sets the tone. When you begin your day with a hit of natural light, some form of physical activity, and even 5 minutes of quiet reflection or journaling, you prime your brain for a state of control. These small actions activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse regulation. That part of your brain must stay strong and engaged throughout the day if you want to keep negative thoughts from taking over. As the day unfolds, the goal is not to be perfect, but to stay responsive instead of reactive. Every time you notice yourself drifting into a spiral, whether it's triggered by a social interaction, an inner voice, or a perceived failure, you immediately implement one of the interventions you've rehearsed: a visual reset, a physiological sigh, a posture change, or a movement break. These aren't random habits, they're circuit interrupters. They disrupt the emotional storm and give your rational brain space to re-engage. Midday practices like strategic breaks, hydration, and re-centering exercises allow you to stay in control even as stress accumulates. It's also critical to understand that energy drives attention. If you skip meals, stay sedentary, or overstimulate with noise and screens, your brain's attention system becomes fragmented. And a fragmented mind is vulnerable to negative narratives. So you build positive attention through rhythm and simplicity, set times to eat, moments to reset, and tasks that are deeply focused. Evening routines close the loop. You create signals for your brain that it's time to slow down, dim lights, reduce stimulation, stop work-related input, and prepare for restorative sleep. Good sleep is not optional. It is the maintenance window where your brain consolidates memories, clears toxins, and resets emotional thresholds. Without it, even your best mental strategies won't hold. Over time, these patterns become identity. Your brain begins to believe the message you're sending every day: I am in control, I am resilient, I have tools. The old, negative patterns begin to lose their power not because you've ignored them, but because you've starved them and fed something stronger. What you repeatedly do becomes who you are. And when your daily life reflects structure, clarity, and alignment, your thoughts begin to mirror that structure. The mind is not some mysterious force that drifts aimlessly. It follows patterns, it obeys signals, and it rewires based on repetition. The practice is simple. The results are profound. You don't escape negative thinking by chance. You kill it by daily design. Negative thinking does not define you. It reflects temporary patterns your brain has learned to repeat. But what the brain learns, it can unlearn. What it has wired, it can rewire. You now understand that negative thoughts are not just mental. They are biological impulses reinforced by neural circuits, stress hormones, and survival instincts that no longer serve your growth. You've seen how specific tools like breathwork, visual reset, movement, dopamine-based reinforcement, and daily rhythm can shift your state from reactive to regulated. These tools aren't theories. They are rooted in how the human brain is designed to adapt and evolve. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are simply untrained in this particular skill. And like any skill, mental mastery begins with deliberate practice. Each breath you take, each action you repeat, and each choice you make to disrupt the spiral builds strength in the circuits that govern clarity, calm, and courage. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise is not luck. It's consistency. You don't need motivation to begin. You need movement. Movement trains chemistry, chemistry influences mindset, and mindset shapes identity. So take control of your biology, your habits, your thoughts. Because when you learn to regulate your mind, you learn to command your life. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress, measurable, repeatable progress that creates momentum, resilience, and inner peace. This is how you kill negative thinking, not by force, but by structure, not with hope, but with action. And once that shift begins, nothing can stop the new version of you from emerging. You now have the tools. The rest is practice. The rest is you.